Hello and welcome to the Gooner Talk. Back again with you guys for another episode of the Canton and Simiu show. Joining me, surprise, surprise, it's Harry Simiu. How you doing, mate? You good? You well?
Yeah, all good. Fancy seeing you here, man, on the Canton and Simi show.
Strange. No, it's good to see you fellow, as always. You can find Harry's channel, Chronicles of a Gooner, where we do this show in alternating weeks. So if you want to find out when next show is or where it'll be over on Harry's channel, which you can find a link to in the description. Very close to hitting 20,000 subs as well, Harry. Very, very close indeed. So if we can give him a bit of a boost, click that link in the chat box, in the description, or wherever it is, and you'll be able to find it. But yeah, how have things been, man? Good week, bad week? Busy week?
Yeah, busy week. I was just saying to you off air, I've not been feeling too great either over the last few weeks, which just makes it more of a slog than it normally is. But no, can't complain. I've got to be honest. Things are okay. What about you? How's it all going?
Yeah, busy, really busy week as well. It's just one of those, really. And next week with 3 games, it's going to get even busier, which is always fun. But I've managed to get myself a ticket, fingers crossed, for a Liverpool game. So
wicked.
Hopefully should be going to that one.
We'll have to get a drink, Tom. We'll have to get a drink.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a case of I was meant to go to what was it? What was the game I was meant to go to? And then I got COVID. So I was meant to go to a game like a couple of weeks. Brentford. Yes, it was Brentford. And then tested positive. So it should be in such close proximity where there's no chance I can test positive. But we'll see what happens. Who knows what world's got for me this week. But yeah, that'll be fun. And Sunday's game in particular against Leicester is an interesting. In fact, all the next 3 games are really big for Arsenal, as is every game until the end of the season. And that is where I kind of want to kick off the conversation, Harry, and answering the question, how do we tackle these next 3 games? So do you go strong in every one? Do you rotate for Liverpool, knowing it's the hardest one and you're better off trying to get points against Leicester and Villa? Or how are you thinking of approaching the game if you're Arteta?
It's hard, isn't it? Because we've had a lot of weekends this season where we've been off, or we haven't had the hard slog of a season that some of the other teams have had, which makes you feel like in theory there should be enough gas in the tank to go through these 3 games. But we know that Arsenal play with an intensity and a work rate that just isn't really easy to sustain. I think actually the reason we are where we are is partly because we've had those bits and pieces and times off. But this is the way football works. There's always going to be a period where you're going to have to plow through, and the top teams do that. I don't think I'd be rotating in any of the games, to be honest. I think that I'd be going for broke in all of them. You go and beat Leicester, and then that, for me, takes the pressure off of the Liverpool game. Not completely, but takes a lot of it away, given that United and Spurs play each other at the weekend. And then you look at Aston Villa as a completely fresh game. It would have been nice if Villa was on this Sunday and we had that extra day's rest playing on the Wednesday prior. But I think one of the good things about Arsenal this season is that we've been consistent in our team selection, that we've gelled, that we've become a cohesive unit. And I'm almost fearful that if we do overthink this and start dismantling stuff to try and get different players in, it could be our undoing. You put a Smith Rowe in for a Martinelli, that's not really neither here nor there for me. I think that's okay. I think we're probably going to see Tomiyasu come back in the next couple of games somewhere, maybe on Sunday, maybe on Wednesday. I don't know. But there'll be a couple of changes anyway, which will freshen things up. I don't think you can go big on it. What about you?
Yeah, I was looking. I did write a piece on this today. It's going to be going out, I think, a little bit later this evening. It was basically looking back on the games against Southampton, West Ham, and Leeds, which were the last time we played 3 games in the league in quick succession, and we used the exact same lineup in all 3 of those games. So Mikel Arteta isn't. He's not uncomfortable using the same team across 3 fixtures. And the West Ham game was huge for that week as well, and ironically fell as the midweek fixture too. And that was the biggest challenge, in the same way that Liverpool was the biggest challenge in these 3 fixtures. I have concerns, obviously, that injuries could crop up, especially with Cedric, and he suffered with injuries at the start of this year. And now with Tomiyasu out, there's that kind of vulnerable part of the situation. But I look at what's available, and it is most of the squad besides just Tomiyasu now, because Smith Rowe is said to be back. And ironically, Smith Rowe came on against West Ham and Leeds in those 3 games and scored in both those games. So there is the depth, there is the quality available to him. And I think that, we've got to take it, as you said, one game at a time. I think people in the chat box have been saying that absolutely we need to use the cup final theory, as Maximir says, one match at a time. If we get a result against Leicester, great. Let's then focus on Liverpool before we think about Villa at the weekend. But I asked this to Kai Karnak earlier on today about this, and I said, and he was very diplomatic in his response, as you would expect, but I just get a weird feeling that the world's kind of against Arsenal this season, and it seems so tactical to put this game on a Wednesday in between the two fixtures where it's a late on Sunday and early on Saturday. And I get the argument about, Champions League football next season, fingers crossed, or Europa League or whatever, we're going to have to know to play Saturday, Wednesday, Sunday, or whatever. But they don't usually put games this close together. There's usually at least 3 days gap between the weekend game, then the European fixture, and then get a couple of days of recovery before the next weekend game. It is a bit odd. Am I looking too conspiracy theory into this, or what?
No, well, I don't think that it is. I don't think it's a deliberate attempt to derail Arsenal, but I do think that it's it's horrible to have these fixture pylons, because we as fans as well, and we as people who go to the games, or and whether you go to the game or you watch it on TV, you pay a subscription, whatever, however you consume your football, you want to see the best quality football. And unfortunately, when you're asking these players to go at 150 miles an hour within a couple of days of each other, with the games being within a couple of days of each other, you're not going to get the best quality football, and you're not going to get the best quality product. I think the fact that Liverpool are in the Champions League has impacted on the scheduling of this game, because it couldn't be played last week because they were in the Champions League, and it couldn't be played 2 weeks prior to that when they had the first leg against Inter. So because of that, I think that's had an impact. So it's difficult and demanding, and I understand why they have trouble slotting these fixtures in. But for me, the bigger issue is, why are the Chelsea and Tottenham games still to be confirmed? Like, that is proof that they are looking to put the games in where it suits them to create the biggest hype and the biggest story, and they're not thinking about the integrity of the competition. It's about TV, it's about money, it's about finance. And just looking at the fact that those two games have not been scheduled yet, that's my gripe with the fixtures at the moment. Why haven't you put them in? Because you want to see how the top four race pans out, and maybe Arsenal Spurs might be a showdown at Tottenham Stadium, and it's one that you can get big TV ratings on. That's my big gripe with the fixtures and the way they're being set up.
Bulgarian Gunnar says, this is nothing, Tom. Just wait till they put the Tottenham game right before the Manchester United one. You can see that is the case. I don't think there's anything wild about that suggestion at all. You look at what they've done with other fixtures and what they're going to do with these ones coming up, and then why they're holding off. And look, Tottenham aren't in anything now. Like, they're out of every cup competition. There is no excuse for them to have not decided on when they're going to reschedule this, other than the fact that they are waiting to see that the TV scheduling. And we're not idiots. We can work this out. And I would just want Arsenal to get that game kind of done and out of the way, so we know where we stand. We're not waiting for that game. We haven't got the pressure of that game on the horizon, and and we know when it's going to turn up. I'm confident for that fixture, as I'm confident for pretty much all of the ones that we've got left of the season. Leicester's, though, a weird one, Harry, because Leicester is a team that I really struggle to kind of pinpoint where they are as a club right now. They've gone off the back of 4 back-to-back wins. Yes, 2 of them have been in Europe against Rennes, and a side that has completely slipped my mind. I think there's probably a good reason for that in the Conference League. And then obviously they've got wins over teams that you would expect them to be. I think Burnley was one and Leeds was the other. So they're teams that you would expect them to get results in. And then they went and lost to a team like Wolves, who I think really dominated them and have really struggled this season to get any kind of form of consistency. Jamie Vardy's going to be out for the game, which is a big loss for them as well. Iheanacho or Daka will come in. We're short of that. But how do you feel about them as a threat, and how confident are you about getting a result over them?
Well, they are a threat because even though, as you say, they've had a really poor season overall, they still have a lot of top quality players in the side who, on their day, are capable of causing you problems. That can be said of a lot of the Premier League clubs. That's the standard of this league and of this competition. I am a bit worried about this fixture. Not so much when I look at this fixture in isolation, but what the consequences of losing it could be, given the games we then have to play after. So if you drop points against Leicester, the likelihood is that you're probably going to then drop points against Liverpool, and then you've got a difficult away trip to Villa. What I mean is, dropping points against Leicester could derail our confidence going into a really important run of games. And that's why this game has more importance to me. And it's one that I'm naturally more nervous about than I would be under different circumstances. I do think they're a threat. I do think they've got a lot of good players. And I do think that if we are going to win this, it's going to be a narrow victory. And it's going to be a victory that we're going to have to work for. I mean, how do you feel going into this game? Because it's very easy to look at the Premier League table and go, oh, Leicester are down in 12th or wherever they are. But that's not the full picture, is it?
No, it's not. It's absolutely not. It's a very winnable game. I don't think we're going out on a pedestal by saying that by any means. You know, especially with the home crowd, the confidence that Arsenal have got. This would be the first time I think in Arteta's tenure that you could get 5 Premier League wins in a row. We're in a really good phase right now. We've got a lot of our players, bar Tomiyasu, available to us now, and everyone's in good form. Saka's playing brilliantly. Odegaard's playing brilliantly. Martinelli got a goal, which will only push him forwards. Lacazette is desperate for a goal, and so he'll be certainly fired up for the game too. Our record with Xhaka and Partey together in the base of that midfield is excellent, and this new formation is suiting us really well as well, pushing Xhaka slightly further up. But as you say, Leicester have got some really good players, and it would be of James Maddison's interest to send us a little bit back to last summer of when we could have signed him and remind us of what a player he is, and it would be within his rhetoric to do that. But it is a game that we have to win. If we are serious about top 4, we have to win this game, especially when you consider what the next 2 games are. I look at the Villa away trip as a trickier fixture than this one, because our record at Villa is not good, and then you've got obviously a huge game against Liverpool in midweek. So of the 3, this is our Watford of Man United's run, if you like. It's the game that we have to win prior to kind of the storm hits, and that adds a little bit of added pressure. There's no expectation really on Leicester to win this game, and their Premier League season is very much petering out to the point where the Conference League is their route back into Europe this season, and getting back into the Europa League will be based on them winning that competition. And if they do win that competition, and West Ham, so I know that went down to that 1-0 result of Sevilla, and I don't expect them to progress past Sevilla. I think are a considerably better side than them. But if they were to say win that competition, then it starts getting complicated about how many teams can start to qualify for these different European sort of systems. So Arsenal need to be wary of that. Arsenal need to make sure they dent Leicester's confidence and then dent West Ham's confidence when they play them. So these are big, big games. And there's also kind of the narrative that goes with it about the transfer side of it, because Yuri Tielemans, as we know, has been linked with Arsenal quite heavily. And if Arsenal qualify for the Champions League, you would imagine that they would be able to be a lot more of an attractive proposition to someone like Tielemans. So there's that too. There's so many underlying narratives, but I am really conscious of time, and I do want to discuss a couple of things and take some questions from the chat box. And there is an elephant in the room regarding football at the moment that we haven't had a chance to discuss since we last spoke, and that is the sanctions placed on Chelsea, which I know my listeners may feel we've done to death at this point, but I am very curious to get your thoughts and feelings on this. And I know you've covered this on your channel as well, but do you feel in any way, shape or form this will have any kind of bearing on Chelsea's form, mentality, and ultimately the top 3 race this season?
Well, I was covering Chelsea's game last night, and I very much expected them to be a little bit distracted, and they weren't. To be fair to them, they weren't. I know the scoreline suggested that it was a close fixture, but it really wasn't. Chelsea were by far the superior side, and probably had they shifted up into 3rd, even 4th gear, they could have wiped the floor with Norwich. They just got a little bit slack, having gone into a 2-goal lead pretty early on. I think this will have some implications. It's impossible for this not to be some form of distraction. But often you find out about people's character when they're faced with situations like this. Some thrive on it. Thomas Tuchel, if I were Thomas Tuchel, I'd be trying to create a bit of a siege mentality around this and use it or try and channel it in a positive way. But of course, there are challenges that come with the restrictions that have been placed on Chelsea Football Club. My view on this is something that I've actually taken quite a bit of flack for over the last 24 hours. I said that the sanctions needed to happen. I said that we shouldn't feel sorry for Roman Abramovich. We shouldn't. If you look at the report that's come out, or the report around the sanctions, it's quite clear that there are links to a regime that is currently involved in a conflict where innocent people are dying and innocent people are losing their homes and having to flee. Now, the common thing that people throw back at me is, yeah, but look at what's going on in this country, or look at what's going on in that country. And I get all of that. And I completely agree that the hypocrisy of the whole thing is a problem. But you don't make a right with another wrong. Do you see what I mean? You don't ignore what's going on in one situation just because another one has been ignored. The right thing to do is to deal with both. And we're not very good at that. We're very good at getting behind certain situations and certain conflicts and then ignoring others because it seems more fashionable. Now, it's like none of these situations are particularly fashionable. Nothing's a situation that you want to be involved in, but we're very good at, when the momentum builds in terms of support for one thing, we all jump on it, and we know that other things are going on and we ignore that. And as a society, we got to get better at that. So that's something that everybody needs to improve on. But as far as Chelsea are concerned, I've got sympathy for some fans. I know a lot of Chelsea fans, and there are Chelsea fans I know who supported the club long before Roman Abramovich came along, and who will continue to do so in the future. If I were a Chelsea fan, I wouldn't be massively panicked, because the minute Roman Abramovich goes, the sanctions in theory become invalid, right? The sanctions are against Roman Abramovich
and his assets.
His assets. So once that club changes hands, which I expect will happen in the next few weeks, that changes things and the situation is no longer the same. But I don't feel sorry for a section of Chelsea fans who seem to turn up to Chelsea games and chant Roman Abramovich's name.
Yeah.
You might be appreciative of what he's done for your football club in terms of the success he's brought you and the investment. You have to be able to compartmentalize what he's done on a football side and his political side. If you can't make that differentiation, then you need to look in the mirror. You can enjoy the success that Chelsea have had over the last 20 or so years, but also recognize that the source of his wealth is not squeaky clean. But at a time where people are dying at the hands of a regime that is supported or has been supported by Roman Abramovich, you can have your opinion, but you don't need to be chanting his name at this period in time. I think that is a failure to read the room. It's done in bad taste. I just think that, for me, is why a lot of people have started looking at Chelsea fans in a bad light. And it's not fair to paint everyone with that brush. I don't want it to become a mudslinging contest. That's exactly what's happening, as is expected in the football world. You know, you got Ralph Rangnick today talking about how Arsenal and Everton have had Russian money in the club before and Chelsea are not the only one. I mean, what's the point in throwing mud at everybody now? You know, just do the right thing, condemn the actual issue at hand, and don't get into this place where it's like a point scoring competition. It's embarrassing and it doesn't do anyone any good.
No, it really doesn't. Someone I follow on Twitter, Tom Overend, people may know him. He tweeted in. So he's a Chelsea fan. And he tweeted kind of in, against Abramovich, and said how it's the right decision for the sanctions and for him to be looking to sell, and that he's thankful for what he's done to their club. But as you said there, it's about compartmentalizing the differences between the two, and it's the timing of also when those chants happen. It's like to chant his name at the moment that there was unity being showed for and in solidarity with the people of Ukraine who are suffering, and the innocents that are dying every single day, to then chant the billionaire owner of Chelsea's name in that moment, it's disgusting. It's nothing short of disgusting, is what it is. And so and it's you're right to say it's not all Chelsea fans. However, there is this continual thing that happens with Chelsea, that you see videos, you see the incidents of racism that we're all very much well aware of associated with Chelsea. And this isn't to say that individuals at Arsenal are not also guilty of doing some pretty horrible things, but you find it happen more frequently, you find it happen a lot more publicly, and you find these videos surface associating with Chelsea specifically. And so I don't think that when these videos and when those chants happen, despite our obvious disgust, I don't think we can really say that there was much surprise that those surfaced, to be fair, based upon what we've kind of come to learn from a section of their fan base. And that's the situation, and that needs to be improved. And that the thing is, Harry, is that not many people are doing anything to improve that situation. Do you think Chelsea, with the reputation of a section of that fan base, do you think they are guilty of not maybe doing enough to tackle the issues and that reputation as well?
Yeah, I think Chelsea Football Club's changed a lot though since Roman Abramovich came in that it's become a much more global entity, and so a larger proportion of the fan base are sort of overseas based and look at things very, very differently. I mean, I always remember like Chelsea before the money, and I always remember sort of older relatives of mine who obviously from a Cypriot background telling me when I was growing up, when I said, why Arsenal? You came to London, you didn't know anything about English football. Why did you pick Arsenal? And often the thing that I get told is, well, it was the ground you could go to where you didn't feel like a foreigner, that you were in danger or that you were an outsider. And listen, every club in the years and the sport in general has a problem with this, but Chelsea are a club who in history have had a bigger problem with it. And I think it's got better over the years as society's got better in that sense, like generally speaking. But I do think there is a reputation that is attached to Chelsea fans that they're not going to just be able to shake overnight. And when things like what happened at Burnley and at Norwich happen, then people are naturally going to reach for the archives and say, well, what about this as well? And what about that? It is more common at some clubs, but we always have to remember that it is still a minority of people.
Yeah.
People associate other clubs with the same sort of issues, and it is always a minority. And sometimes the minority are louder, and it's hard not to form an opinion based on the minority's actions. But I know a lot of good Chelsea fans as well, so it's really hard to to put this into the right context. But it's a touchy subject, rightfully so. But I think Chelsea, in history anyway, have had a bigger problem with this than other clubs. Yeah.
In the chat box, there's a question brought up by Balaji who says, why did Ranić make such comments in the first place regarding, I don't know if you saw the quotes.
I saw the quote. I saw the quote, but I didn't watch the video. So I don't know what the exact context of it is.
Yeah.
So
for those that don't know, the quote was effectively like that. He mentioned how Arsenal have had a Russian oligarch involved in the club as well. Interview up so we can apply the context. Let's scroll down. He said, yeah, but not only us. The same is true with 2 or 3 other clubs. When responded and asked about Mikel Arteta's side. Oh, sorry. I mean, this is the complete wrong quote. This is the reason why you get the proper thing at the right time. This is why it's annoying when you're doing this live. But effectively, you just said something along the lines of, Arsenal have had, and Everton as well have had this Russian association as well at the same time. I think a lot of Arsenal fans took exception to it because, Alisher Usmanov, who was the guy we're talking about, was a 33%, approximately 33% stakeholder in the club who never had any kind of control or say in any of the decision making because he was never allowed onto the board. So I think that's why Arsenal fans, here we go, I found the quote. Ranić said, could anyone foresee what would happen in the last 4 weeks? We have had to be very careful to blame someone, not only at Chelsea, but also at Arsenal and Everton. There were ownership shares by Russian oligarchs. Chelsea was not the only club. I understand why you bring it up, and you bring it up so that you're kind of not isolating Chelsea when there's been, Russian influence. I say influence isn't even the right word because I don't think Usmanov was able to have any influence on Arsenal during his tenure there. Is that fair, or am I being naive?
I think so. Obviously, there was money in the club that he put in to buy his shares, but he wasn't calling the shots. The thing is not that Rangnick is wrong in what he's saying. It's that whenever something like this happens, whenever there's a serious issue, the first reaction of some people is to throw mud at others instead of actually tackling the issue and always wanting to divert away from the problems. And as Bulgarian Guna points out, in the chat, Rangnick was at Lokomotiv Moscow, who were, from what I understand of their history, were one of the kind of state, I think it was a railway club or something during the
It
kind of
would make
Soviet
sense with
era.
its name.
Yeah, it's,
Yeah.
for me, it doesn't make sense that somebody like Ralph Rangnick, who's gone and worked for a club with that type of history and that type of connection, would now want to throw mud at other. It's just weird to me. Like the reaction should be, what's going on at Chelsea is what's going on. The government have taken their decision, and that's and I'm staying out of it. The way Mikel Arteta handled it perfectly today. He said that Tuchel dealt with it with dignity in a professional way, and he wants to stay out of it as much as possible. And that was that. You don't need to throw mud at other people. It creates another narrative and sparks another debate, another argument that is just not helpful in any way, shape, or form.
Absolutely. We have run over a little bit, and I do want to take some questions for the chat. So if you do have any questions, football related, about Arsenal, especially the games coming up, then do throw them into the chat box, and we'll try and tackle them as we can. Penny Ween asking earlier on in the show, potentially putting the North London derby as a top 4 decider. Is that actually fair on the players? It then adds more pressure, and then it would be as if it was just dropped in where there was a gap.
Two ways of looking at this. We could be in a position where we don't have to worry about that fixture if we do things right between now and then. And I don't mean don't worry about it because it's okay to lose to Spurs. I mean, as in the level of pressure around it could be significantly less. So it might not be the worst thing in the world, but it is frustrating that, fans don't know what's going on. We're in the middle of March, and this game is still not been organised.
Breaking news, according to Olu in the chat. I think this revolves around a Times piece that's just been released by, looking for the authors, Matt Lawton and Molly Hudson and Stephen Swinford, who have released an article which says Chelsea's bank accounts have been frozen, leaving the club facing financial paralysis after the government sanctioned Roman Abramovich. The Times has been told the UK government yesterday gave Chelsea a licence to continue with football and related activities after Abramovich, the Premier League club's owner, was sanctioned over his links to Vladimir Putin, the Russian president. Sources at the club have warned that despite the license, several of the club's corporate accounts, including credit cards, have been frozen because the banks are being risk averse. A senior source at Chelsea confirmed that the situation was causing grave concern. It's making it even more difficult to run our day-to-day operations. I don't want to really get bogged down in this again, but it just seems like there's kind of a new thing every day on this, and something new affecting this. So I think it's one we will learn more about, between now and the end of the season. That's for sure.
It's why you can't get you can have an opinion based on what you know at the time, but you can't kind of nail your colors to the mast and say, well, this is my view and it's never going to change it, because it's such a fluid situation. We haven't seen this before. We don't know how this plays out, and we just got to see how it goes.
Steve says, is 6 points from the next 3 games a decent return?
I would say so. I think if we get 6 points from the next 3 games, we will be in a very strong position to go on and finish in the top 4.
Yeah, absolutely. Social says, do you think we should play at least 1 game every season abroad? This is obviously something similar to what you see in La Liga with the Super Cup being played in the Middle East, Saudi Arabia, I want to say.
Stick the Community Shield abroad. I wouldn't really have that much of an issue with that. Nobody cares about it anyway. But no, not a league game. How does that work? Like, who loses out on a home game to go and play? It's the Premier League is already a juggernaut financially. La Liga do it, and Serie A will talk about doing it because they're trying to catch up from a marketing perspective. Premier League don't need to do that. I'd be shocked if they made a move like that. Well, maybe not shocked, but I'd be strongly against it.
Shocked is the wrong word, It wouldn't shock us at all, really. PJT says, with Arteta protecting Tommy in order to bring him back into the fold at the right time, do you think we will see him feature in the next 2 fixtures? Thankfully, Cedric has held the fort meanwhile.
I think it'd probably be too much to ask of Tomiyasu to play in 2 games in quick succession, given his current fitness issues. So maybe we might see him come back into the side for Liverpool, although he came back last time against Liverpool, didn't he, in the Carabao Cup, and he didn't have a great game that night. So
got injured again.
Yeah, exactly. So I don't know. I said it to you last time. This Tomiyasu situation for me just seems to be rumbling on from week to week, and the more it rumbles on, the more concerned I am about it. I mean, are you not a little bit worried about this problem? Because We keep hearing he's in contention. He'll probably be back next week, and then he's not.
What I know is that Mikel Arteta doesn't like to give any information away, and always speaks in codes and like deflects and diverts attention. And let's be honest, the brash word is probably lies. So he will lie about certain things, and lies may be too harsh, but he will bend the truth or he will withhold certain information, and that's fine. You need to do that. You want to give as little information as possible to your opponents to know whether or not he's starting, and that's why I think when Tomiyasu came in for the game against City, it was a big surprise to everyone, and it nearly got us a result because he was as good as we could ask him really to have been in that game. So I think that he's just going through a bad fitness period. He injured one calf. The likelihood is that you can injure the other one. He did, and he'll return from that fairly okay, I think, in the near future. Lastly, from Paul, if Tottenham lose to Man United, would that end their battle with us for top 4?
Ooh, I don't know.
Is that this weekend, that game?
Yeah, Saturday, 5:30, which is why it's imperative that we win against Leicester. And then if there's a favourable result for us in that game, then all of a sudden the pressure could be off a little bit against Liverpool, because that's a game in hand, right? If we beat if we beat Leicester and Tottenham and United draw, we open up a 2-point further advantage on both of those.
Do you want to draw, or would you rather one side won?
I think I'd prefer the draw, because it doesn't really do much for either side. And then you've got then if we lose to Liverpool, and they win their next games, we've had 2 points in the bag advantage extra that we've gained over that past week that we can kind of write off against that, if that makes sense. So I think I'd probably prefer. I think Man United winning is the worst result.
Really?
Yeah, I still think that Man United are the ones to watch, but I'd rather none of them won. Yeah.
Even though we've got 3 games in hand on them.
Yeah, but
it would be 4 after that result.
Yeah, but look who the games in hand are against.
I know. There's still games in hand.
I only think we're going to do it. I think Arsenal will qualify for the Champions League if we're in pole position without the games in hand. If we need to rely on going away to Chelsea and away to Spurs, I would be very fearful of that.
Yeah, I agree. We need to keep it in our own hands. We just need to focus on Leicester, really. Like, whatever happens in that game will happen. And, we got to hope for a win. Prediction?
I went 1-0 to the Arsenal on my podcast, so I'm going to stick with that. Narrow win.
I'm going to go with 1-0 is a really good prediction, I think, actually. I'm probably going to agree with you. 1-0. I'll go with that as well. It's just, I feel like it's going to be a really bitty game for some reason. I don't know why. I just get that feeling. Thank you so much, guys, for tuning in the chat box. Really appreciate your time as always. Do drop a like on the video and subscribe to the channel if you're new. If you've enjoyed my chat with Harry, you can rejoin us next week on his channel, which you can find a link to in the description, Chronicles of a Gooner. We do this every other week on each other's channels. So the next show next week will be over there. Harry, thank you so much. Tell people where they can find you.
Yeah, thanks for having me, man. Always good to chat. You can find me at the Chronicles of a Gooner. It's on YouTube and all audio platforms, and you can follow me on Twitter at Harry Simu.
Lovely stuff. We'll be back tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. UK time for the next show again, as per on a Saturday. Lovely stuff, and Sunday as well, and Monday too. So always putting in that hard graft in the mornings.
You want to have a lay-in, mate? You need to have a lay-in.
I took a day off on Wednesday. We didn't do one Wednesday because I didn't really have much choice. My internet decided to just crash, so that was taken away. But it's great. It's great. Get out early, get going. I'm a morning person anyway, so I mean, you couldn't really do that if you weren't a morning person.
No way.
When kids finally happens one day, I suppose that may be when the show comes to an end in that sense. But there's a little while yet.
At least you're prepared for the whole early wake up thing.
True. Although I think 8 a.m. is probably a little bit generous on the word early, to be fair.
True.
Just a tad. Thank you so much for listening, guys. We'll see you again very, very soon. And as always, up the Arsenal.